Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. I'm your host, Marty Bennett, and today on the Roundup, we're going to be talking about 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And for those of you new to the Roundup, we take our questions that we ask here on Monday morning or Monday afternoon, or the questions that we ask here on Wednesday. What day is it? Wednesday afternoon. From our newsletter that comes out on Monday mornings. And that newsletter is called All the SMIE News Fit to Share. If you're wondering what SMIE means, it's my consulting business, social media, and international education consulting. And had the business for about the last 12 years since I left Education USA in 2014, and have used this as my platform whether I'm working an on-campus job or not. I am currently employed with the University of Akron as their Director of International Recruitment and Engagement, and have been in that position for over a year now. But I have the opportunity to come to you weekly to talk to you live on Wednesdays about our in-depth takes on some of the critical issues of the day and how we are or aren't leveraging these stories to our advantage in international education. But the newsletter that comes out on Mondays, this is available from our website in 2 different formats. You can either subscribe to get the email version, which comes out Monday at about 9 in the morning Eastern time. And that you can subscribe via that method, or if you prefer to get your news via LinkedIn, you can do so also from our website link that's in the chat, smieconsulting.org/subscribe. You can click on that link in the subscribe section that says subscribe via our LinkedIn newsletter, and those are the 2 options. And I'm very proud to say that between the 2 versions now, the LinkedIn and the email version, we now have well over 2,850 subscribers who are getting our content weekly in their inboxes or through their email LinkedIn notifications. So thank you to all of you who've been subscribed to the newsletter through the 2 different means. Really means a lot to me, knowing that so many international educators around the U.S. and the world are consuming our content and helping with their international edification each week. In that newsletter, we do have 4 sections. We have a social media section that can cover everything from basically how social media, different platforms are being used in international education to reach international students. It also covers AI stories, upcoming webinars, new digital reports, any interesting blogs that we see out there on topics related to international education that we think are worthy of sharing with our audience. So that's the first section. The next is kind of a U.S. central section, kind of the top level news in the U.S. as it relates to international education. This could be new pieces of legislation coming up. It could be executive orders. It could be legal cases to those executive orders. It could be any sort of national report or international reports on different content related to international education, talking about whether it's agents or new destinations or individual markets and how they are market profiles that might be useful. So we share all of that in that section. Then a Solution Central, which is kind of the positive energy I think that we need in this field, particularly in the last year. It talks about some ways that some positive stories in the news, or ways that are that individual institutions are taking creative paths or being innovative in the way they're delivering their programs to hopefully reach an international audience, but in perhaps a different way than might have been previously done. So this newsletter has been coming out for almost 7 years now, and it's almost 8 years now, and it's been really a labor of love for me. And I do this as a service to my community, to my international colleagues around the world, because I'm in your shoes. I'm on campus working for an institution. I'm very knee deep in my job, but I know how important it is that how to get a better perspective on what's going on in the rest of the world. And for me, the newsletter is meant to do just that. Can I give you our hot takes on Monday morning, what these different news stories have to do with international education, and how with my initial quick thoughts on those. And then Wednesday, we look at some of the themes we see developing in each week's newsletter and go in depth into those three on the roundup on Wednesday afternoon. Now, I will say there are times when I'm traveling for work where I might do a remote from a conference overseas or a conference domestically. Maybe if, depending on the time zones, I might do a live if the time zones align, that I could still do it from a school visit or through an event I'm attending overseas. Might be able to do something like that. Next week, for example, I'll be in Jordan participating in some school visits and some fairs in Amman. So I hope we may have time to connect next Wednesday as well. But today we have three basic questions we're going to be asking. Our colleagues in the field have been asking these questions too. So we're going to be taking a look at those stories today. And those stories are, first of which are centered around what does AI look like in higher ed today? And that's a question that we see, and for the last 2 years, we've certainly seen many institutions grapple with this very topic, and some are really focused on protecting the institution and not being overly it's an easy way to say it, not being overly important about equipping students, but rather preventing students from using certain tools. So I think for us, for many of us in international education, we know our students are smart cookies, that they are ones who are actively seeking to use available tools to help them do their jobs better, to help them apply to institutions, to even potentially use AI for college search. And that's one of the first articles we'll share from our colleagues at ICEF Monitor. There's a guest editorial in there this past week that goes into a review of how AI is now being used increasingly, not exclusively, but increasingly in how students are searching for colleges, and what the implications are for universities that quickly realize that they don't have real control over everything that they need to have control to show up and get positive feedback on how your institution will show up in an AI search, generative AI search. So that's the piece that in ICEF Monitor. There's also a report on how, from a blog actually from my friend and colleague Greg Holtz at University of Central Missouri, who has kind of been on the forefront of certainly talking about how AI can be used in international education, international student recruitment. He's been using a platform called Ado for a number of years, or at least a year or so now, and is using it kind of as a one-stop clearinghouse, as its data organization and being able to run really substantive reports and keeping track of what's coming up in the field, news, application flow, admissions funnel, all of that, and have kind of a bigger picture view that AI can provide that saves him hours and hours of labor trying to collect all the content he needs to be able to send it to senior leadership who need to report on X, Y, or Z country and why we need to recruit there, or how we're doing, how our efforts showing proof of concept in certain countries. So Greg certainly got a great, his fingers certainly are on the pulse of how you can use international AI in student recruitment internationally. And he's got a great article, his most recent blog from his series on Substack. And then the final piece is on how DeVry, one of the kind of for-profit career focused educational institutions, they have now embedded AI courses in every academic discipline. And this is something we've been seeing organically at the University of Akron, where I work, and you may have similar experiences on your own campus, that as we start to talk about AI, the impact of AI on our institutions, there's hardly a major out there that isn't incorporating using AI tools in the classroom. Pedagogically, it makes sense to help make students aware of things that they can use to refine or improve or create initial content that they can then use and perfect and make their own. And that's the piece that worries most people. How can they make it their own? But the labor saving time of AI really can cut the work necessary to achieve similar results down significantly. The question that most institutions have, and certainly we saw it in the admissions world, we've seen that for those of us that require essays for international applicants. We've seen that certainly at the undergraduate level at more selective institutions, how students are using AI to write their responses to essay prompts, and then institutions are using AI detection software like Turnitin and other versions of that to see if actually what a student has submitted is actually real. So those are some things that we were seeing. That was the initial battle, I think, in the admissions world. It's evolved into how institutions are, even in the admissions office, how we're reviewing applications, the process, a cumbersome process of calculating GPAs on foreign transcripts, if we don't have a required NACES, a credential evaluation. How do you get that equivalent GPA? How do you figure out the total number of credits that they should have transferring in if they're coming in that way? So these are the things where AI can provide a very useful tool for staff at universities to help cut down on the amount of time needed to turn around an application decision, to get the right file to the departments that need to make a decision on a graduate application on what that equivalent GPA is. So there's some real valuable tools that AI is providing institutions who want to have a really clear opportunity to cut their processing time, cut their expenses, and involve a much streamlined process for applicants. We see it in the classroom as DeVry is doing, where they're adding AI content to every particular academic discipline. We're seeing that, as I said, at the University of Akron, where there hardly is a major that doesn't have a course, or teachers even in most courses typically how the applications of AI can be used in every academic program. Of course, those that want to be AI specialists in terms of designers of AI systems that would focus on computer science related academic disciplines, or those that might want to be using it in the business world. AI in Business Information Systems is one of our academic programs we have at the University of Akron. So all of those things are certainly on our radar as priorities for the institution and on the academic side, but also on the administrative side. I know different offices are exploring software packages that will help them do a better job of processing their internal applications for on-campus jobs, for different functions that they have at the university. So I really do believe that there's a lot that's going on, but I want to pay particular attention to this ISIF article, because in that article it made clear that for universities, when it comes to when AI is used in search, what that means for an institution in terms of what do they have control over. Number one is obviously going to be their website. Three areas that are basically used to populate responses that might be generated from a generative AI prompt like a Gemini or ChatGPT, whatever it might be. So for this particular article, he says, your website is the only place on the web that is fully controlled by you. Making sure your website provides accurate information and is easy to navigate helps prospective students directly and feeds the AI model at the same time. So that's the first thing, the only thing you really have complete control over. Second are ranking and comparison websites, especially important when prospective students ask questions around rankings, which they often do. So this could be some of the college search sites out there, and the THE and QS and Shanghai rankings, all of those. Third is digital word of mouth, what your current students and alumni are saying about your institution across the web. And that provides a more quote-unquote impartial perspective from the student's point of view, and the ways you can encourage this, such as working with student ambassadors as content creators. So that's a key there. The key that I always say is an important part of your overall success as when it comes to student recruitment is how well you're leveraging your current students and alumni in your student recruitment efforts to recruit students and provide them the current student perspective or recent graduate perspective on how life at your institution is, because they're the ones that live the life that future students need to know about or want to know if that's going to be for them. So 2 out of the 3 you do have some control over in terms of how one you do exclusively with your website, rankings and comparison websites, depending on which rankings there are, how highly you're ranked in different things, may or may not be of value, or where you would have direct control over on a month-to-month basis, certainly on a year-to-year, depending on how well your institution's doing, who's answering the surveys at your campus, all of those kind of things that go into populating those ranking websites. Those are the kind of things that matter. But the digital word of mouth, you do have more control than you think if you can leverage your current students and alumni successfully in that process. So that's the piece that I would really want to focus on in this whole conversation about AI, is really as it impacts us as student recruiters, as international admissions people. We need to be leveraging our current students and alumni. We need to make sure our website content's rock solid, so that when students do start doing more and more search using AI to generate their potential results, to match you with match your institution with their interests, the more that you're doing to leverage the resources you do have some control over, the better your chances are of best representing your institution to your prospective audiences. So I'll drop the links to each of the stories in the chat so you have those. But really the point of all of these, every time we do these stories, is really to share just how there are oftentimes many sides to the same story. And I think for many of us in international admissions, we can kind of often get, depending, we do have a little bit of squirrel disease, so we get distracted by the new shiny toys, and we get bombarded by all sorts of vendors that are selling AI-driven power products that are going to be the savior for our recruitment challenges that we might be facing at our institutions. So that's, and it's hard to really understand what's really valuable in this whole process. So when we do talk about topics like AI, which are very broad and have implications far beyond just the topic of AI, it can cover, as this story on AI does. We are involved in it in the classroom. We're involved in it on the recruitment side. We're involved in it in the admission side. There isn't a part of our institutions that aren't dealing with questions related to AI in one way, shape, or form. So how it looks on your campus could be very different than how it looks on mine. But where possible, we want to identify opportunities where we can, in the recruitment admission side of things, have some control over what we're doing to make our institution more successful and more productive in terms of its recruitment strategies, and more targeted and focused and on point, and leveraging resources that we have direct control over. So let's move on to our second question of the day, and that is, why are H-1B issues something to be concerned about? Now, for those unfamiliar, H-1Bs are basically a dual intent work visa that allows individuals who have specific strengths professionally in particular disciplines. For tech companies, for example, in the United States that are looking to hire talent to work in their programming areas, in their computer science world, and in anything AI related, anything tech related, STEM related, they're gonna be looking for top talent. And unfortunately, in the U.S., we don't generate enough of our own graduates that are U.S. citizens and permanent residents to fill the kind of jobs that are out there that are in high demand. So companies are generally look to international sources, two main sources, either students that are already attending U.S. institutions that might be already working in tech world companies on an OPT, part of their academic benefits or post-study work benefits that they have as F1 visa students. They have between 1 and 3 years available to them. So STEM OPT is the 3-year option that gives companies a try before you buy kind of an option for international students in terms of before making them a permanent hire or a semi-permanent hire. They can have them on trial for a year to 3 years to see if they can meet their qualifications. So it's not just the tech world. Their H-1Bs are used in the medical fields, are used by educational institutions. A lot of different places can use H-1Bs to hire folks. Teachers are hired. Foreign teachers are hired in some rural communities that don't have a lot of domestic folks to fill teaching spots in Alaska and other more remote areas. School districts will use H-1Bs to hire teachers from abroad to come and work there. The challenge is with this current administration, we've gone through this in the last few months. Back in September, I'm traveling in India on a recruitment trip, meeting with our new partners there, and the news broke that the H-1B laws were going to be changing, or regulations were going to be changing, that all of a sudden anyone who wanted to apply for an H-1B was going to have to pay, or the company that's going to sponsor them was going to have to pay $100,000 for new H-1B applicants, not renewals, just new ones. Then a week later it changes, and it's only outside the country direct hires on H-1B companies would have to pay that $100,000. So for a country like India that is so focused on post-study work opportunities and all the pathways to work from study or direct from India to the U.S. to work, all of that market just overreacts to everything that might be even proposed as work changes or authorization changes in the United States. Certainly we felt that and had to field a lot of questions about what does this policy mean for Indians who want to have their American dream some way or shape or form. So it is a high importance topic for a lot of folks overseas that are looking to potentially come here and study and looking at a longer term pathway to longer term work and maybe even residency eventually. But H-1B changes have been happening. So we kind of dodged a bullet a bit on the higher ed side in that our students are not going to be, if they're graduating and going on an OPT and then applying for H-1Bs with companies, or the companies agreeing to sponsor them on H-1B, those companies hiring international students graduating from U.S. colleges, they would not be subject to that H-1B $100,000 application fee issue, just the normal $3,000 or $4,000 amount for expedited. There's also still concern. We know that H-1B is moving away in 2026 from the lottery system, which has been the way it's been done for well over a decade. A lottery of limited number of H-1Bs awarded each year, 60 plus thousand, and another 20,000 for anyone with a master's or above. That those 80,000 or so that are out there have, for the lion's share, have gone to Indian applicants, either students graduating on OPT, transitioning to H-1B, or those coming direct from abroad. That lottery system existed for a number of years, and really tech companies learned how to game the system. The big players, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Meta, whatever it might be, they found ways to file H-1B applications for the same individual at multiple locations. And each of those individual applications for the same person would be treated separately in the lottery. So increasing basically the number of opportunities you have to get one of your potential applicants a job. So that's a real challenge. So that system was gamed with using the lottery by some of these tech companies. Now it's going to a more of a merit-based system. So to increase salary requirements, that makes it a little bit harder for entry-level folks coming out with bachelor's degrees to get H-1Bs directly, but maybe after a year or two of work, they can do that. Certainly, STEM is certainly the preferred pathway to H-1B but they're medical institutions, they're educational institutions that aren't subject to the caps, the 80,000 a year or so of H-1Bs that are issued. But what has become of more concern recently is the fact that H-1Bs are now for state institutions. We have in Texas and Florida over the last couple of weeks, both of those states have basically told their public institutions that they no longer should, or there's a pause, an indefinite pause in Texas, and similar plans in Florida, that public and state institutions in those two states should no longer be able to will no longer be able to issue H-1Bs. So this is for researchers, for scholars, for faculty. There's now in those two states, definitely in Texas, I think it's making its way through the Board of Regents in Florida, are not going to be able to hire international talent using the H-1B program because of concerns that Texas jobs, particularly at state institutions, that and in Florida, same thing. At state institutions, Texas jobs, Florida jobs should be going to folks from Texas, folks from Florida. So that tends to get very narrow very fast when we start talking like that. Certainly there's certain reasons why that makes sense, because obviously state universities are very different than they used to be in the early 2000s, where state support might have been 30-50% of an institution's budget was coming from state sources. In most state institutions now, it's under 20%. Some are state supported. They don't call themselves state institutions anymore. They call themselves state supported, at least in terms of financial commitments from the state to their budgets. So there's a lot of doubt being sown from some of these states, Texas and Florida for sure. And there are faculty groups that have warned that, hey, this is not the way to go, that these bans at the state university level on H-1Bs is counterproductive. It's going to halt research. It's going to halt our ability to teach certain classes. It's going to be a real show for those institutions trying to maintain their what they have. And even just to continue operating as is, let alone try anything new that might that fills a void that they don't have capacity internally to do currently. The other complicating market, I mentioned India in the conversation around H-1B. That's 70% of H-1Bs currently are from India. There was an announcement last week that H-1B appointments at embassies and consulates in India are on hold until 2027 to get a new appointment if you have an H-1B application pending, or a visa ready to go. So all those folks, employers, are having to put their potential new employees on pause or look at other alternative remote work opportunities so they can work from India instead of being in the United States for their jobs. So that was a week or so ago that announcement was made. But we've gotten the word in the last couple of days that there's now a trade deal, or at least a tariff deal with India, that I've been saying for months that once that happens, when Modi agrees to stop buying Putin's oil, which looks like that's part of this agreement, in addition to the reduction in tariffs, that will free things up. It will improve relations. It may lead to an unfreezing of visa appointments and a more common sense approach to visa appointments and processing than is currently being done in India by U.S. consulate officials. So these are the things that we're hoping to see some movement on now. But H-1Bs do have very direct applications to what we do if you're recruiting in certain markets. And India and China are certainly the top two for that, accounting for probably close to 85 to 90% of all H-1Bs go to those two countries. So we're going to shift gears in our last topic. As we like to do each week, we do take a look at some international, at least one international story in terms of how different major destinations or even newer destinations that are trying to become bigger players are, how they're doing in their attempts to internationalize in terms of diversifying their student bodies, in terms of visa policies, all of that. The one we're focusing on this week is the UK. The UK released a couple weeks ago their new international education strategy, and yes, that's as a government, there is a national international ed strategy, a government level one that is put out. This is the first one in a few years from the Labour government in a number of well over a decade, and it has at its core not a number target, which is unusual. In the previous one, they wanted 660,000 international students by the end of the 2030 or by 2025 or 2030. They achieved their goal far in advance, I think, of that goal. But this one does not have a number target for onshore international students recruitment in terms of how many students they want the country to have. Their focus is on in this case, a pound amount of 40 billion pounds that they want to have as revenue coming from international education sources. The direct students coming from abroad to the UK who are living, studying, paying tuition in country is really the majority of that, greater majority of that amount. But increasingly, transnational education, TNE, we talk about that regularly here on the Roundup, is becoming a much more prominent function of international offices on university campuses in the UK. They are, even though numbers wise, I think there may be more programs that are U.S. based that are on the particularly international branch campuses. Karen Fisher reported 56 or so. I don't think that's right. I think UK universities have been doing TNE well for well over 2 decades. They have currently 690,000 students around the world taking UK degrees outside of England, outside of Britain. And that there was even the case last couple of years where there were more graduates each in the last 2 years with British degrees outside of the UK than inside the UK. So TNE is already huge. We don't do anywhere near that volume. So by volume, the UK universities are educating far more, probably 10 times more number of students than we do in the US with our branch campuses. So I think what in this new policy, the UK policy, international education strategy, they are now pushing TNE as much more a significant growth area for universities. And the value of those TNE existing pipelines, I think there's a couple articles that I've posted on that that are in the 5 billion a year collectively. So as a percentage of the overall amount that they're looking for, they want that number to grow significantly. We see a number of UK universities have been having initial discussions about opening shop in India, finally opening campuses there in Gift City and other places. We've seen in China, British universities actually have very good success with enrolling students through partnerships with local universities in China. So there may be more of those popping up. So there's so many different ways that a TNE is already functioning well for British universities. They have obviously a good base to build on, and they're being asked to do that. And we'll see why it's going to grow. And I think part of the why it's important to the UK audience is why it's important to Australia, why it was important to Canada that they started looking at more TNE opportunities, is because they're at capacity. they don't have bandwidth on their campuses, in their communities, to house more international students. They love the dollars that they bring, dollars or pounds that they bring into their economies, but they don't have the services to take care of them. The housing services, healthcare services, transport services, all of that. They're not built for the amount of international students that they were handling. We got up to a point in Canada where they were 35% international. They're dropped down now well below that from their 2024 high. In Australia, of a group of 8 institutions, their top 8 universities all are at about 45 to 50% international. The government's actually capped them at 50% international. They won't get any more than that in terms of their allotments for new student visas. You have in the UK, the 150 universities, they're already enrolling 600,000 students, international students, that they don't have capacity. They're at 35% as well. So they ran into problems pre-pandemic and during the pandemic with not having housing because they're not purpose-built residential communities like we are at most universities in the United States. So they didn't take into account the impact all these extra new students were having on their local communities. And as a result, when they reached breaking point, pandemic related and otherwise, everything kind of just fell apart and public resentment increased. You saw that in Australia, you saw that in the UK, you saw that in Canada in different levels. And you've seen that to a lesser extent here in the US for different reasons, more political than necessarily anti-immigrant. Where our country has become anti-immigrant in terms of illegal immigration because of the previous administration's open door policy that basically let anybody in and basically never followed up and had a very open border policy. And we're reaping the consequences of it now across the country. Whether you like that or not, that's the reality of what's happened, and that's led to the victory that Trump had in 2024, winning the election largely on his positions to close the border, strengthen immigration reform, all of that, and deport the illegals that had come in who shouldn't have been allowed in the first place. So with all that being said, we have different challenges than the UK has, than Canada has, than Australia has. But TNE for the UK is rock solid, an important part of every significant institution in the country has a variety of folks working on TNE initiatives around the world. And the government is seeing that as an opportunity to export British education around the world to countries that need it, that don't have the capacity in their own countries, in their own higher ed systems to do so. So that's what we have for you this week on the Roundup. Thanks for bearing with us today. We appreciate your time and attention and look forward to chatting with you again soon. Cheers.